love affairs, and plane crash found after 29 years. British Bill Lancaster emigrated to Australia before the outbreak of World War I. In 1916, he enlisted in the Australian Army, later transferring to the Australian Flying Corps. After the war he remained in the UK, joined the UK Royal Air Force, and got married in 1919 at age 21. Back in Civvy Street, the natural adventurer eagerly jumped at a flying job. The Avro Aircraft Company was looking for a pilot to attempt a flight to Australia in its new avian biplane to test the reliability of this new breed of light aircraft. Note, this book is one of two referenced for this video. Mrs. Jessie Chubbie Miller, an Australian pilot and wife of a leading Australian journalist, yearned to become the first woman to make the long-distance flight, and persuaded Lancaster to take her with him. They left Croydon Airport, UK, on the 14th of October, 1927, bound for Darwin, Australia. Fortunately, it was not a speed record attempt, as it took 5 months to reach Australia. Their flight met with bad weather, mechanical problems and a crash landing. Note, this book is 2 of 2 referenced for this video. While waiting for repairs, they were passed by another Avro Avian en route to Darwin. Bert Hinkler was on his record-breaking first solo to Australia. They received worldwide publicity after finally getting to Darwin. Theirs was the longest flight by a woman. They got rousing receptions as they toured Australia. During the months together, they fell in love, while being already married to others and Lancaster with 2 children. Note, the first part of the trip is hidden by the book cover flap. A year later, Lancaster, accompanied by his wife, was promoting UK aircraft engines in the USA. After failing to reconcile his teetering marriage, his wife returned to the UK. While he was in the USA, Chubbie also moved to the USA and divorced her husband. In 1932, a writer offered to write a book about Chubbie's life. As Lancaster spent weeks away from home trying to find work as a pilot during the Great Depression, Chubbie and the writer worked together, and he eventually begged her to marry him, and she accepted. Lancaster was shattered by the news. He flew home and pleaded with her to rethink the matter. The 3 of them, hopelessly perched on the points of a classic love triangle, stayed together in Chubbie's Miami apartment on the night of the 13th of April, 1932. Next morning, the writer was dead, killed by a bullet through the head from Lancaster's pistol. After a long, detailed, sensational trial, the matter was deemed a suicide and Lancaster was judged not guilty. Lancaster and Chubbie returned to England, broke and out of work. He decided to attempt a record-breaking flight to restore his pilot reputation and mitigate the adverse publicity from his trial. His parents offered to finance his attempt on the London to Cape of Good Hope record. Amy Johnson recently took the record from Jim Mollison in a time of 4 days 6 hours and 55 minutes. He purchased the tiny Avro Avian Southern Cross Miner, owned by Charles Kingsford Smith. To beat Amy Johnson's time, he must take no more than 2 hours sleep at each stop. A lone journalist, his parents, and Chubbie were all who came to see Lancaster off from the UK's Lympne airfield early on the 11th of April, 1933. I make it clear I am attempting this at my own risk, and don't expect any efforts to be made to find me if I'm reported missing. Notes. 1. Former Lympne airfield is now part industrial and farming. 2. There is no Avro Avian for MSFS, so we'll take the very similar de Havilland Gypsy Moth. 3. Lancaster's actual rego was GABLK. Privately, Lancaster said this was to be his final effort to get back into aviation, a do-or-die effort. If he failed in the attempt, he did not relish the thought of coming back. These statements later led to speculation that he had deliberately flown to his death, which was almost certainly not the case. Lancaster took off in semi-darkness at 5:38 a.m., the 11th of April 1933. Ahead lay 10,500 kilometers to the Cape of Good Hope, including the dreaded 2,500 kilometers desert crossing. Other than a 2-gallon drum of water and some food from his mother, he carried no survival supplies. He now faced 72 hours flying in 4 days if he was to beat the record. A lot of the few hours on the ground would be taken up with servicing and refueling. He planned to cover the first 1,850 kilometers to Iran in the first day, before commencing the flight over the Sahara. Was Lancaster physically and mentally prepared for this trip? Probably not. In the previous 12 months he had spent 3 months in jail, then lived on the brink of a nervous breakdown through his harrowing trial, and he had not flown for 12 months. Before crossing the Mediterranean Sea to Iran and Algeria, unfavorable winds forced an unplanned refueling stop here at Barcelona in Spain. On reaching Iran that night, Lancaster was showing signs of exhaustion. He had no rest and French officials tried to detain him as he was in no condition to cross the desert. Further delays robbed Lancaster of 2 hours, and when he finally left Iran at 3 a.m., he was 6.5 hours behind schedule. Flying the most demanding leg, he crossed the Atlas Mountains in darkness and at daylight picked up the Trans-Saharan track leading to Regain, all the while heading south in Algeria. The strain was really taking its toll when Lancaster landed here at Adrar, north of Regain, at 8:30 a.m. He refueled and an hour later was airborne again. His plan was now to overfly Regain and complete the 300 kilometers left across the Sahara in one hop. But Lancaster followed the wrong track and ended up at Aleph. He headed again for Regain. Again he got lost and ended up back at Adrar. He finally located Regain and was forced to land. He wasted 4.5 hours and almost all his fuel. Officials at Regain begged him to sleep. He had been 30 hours in the air. He could barely stand, let alone fly. But for Lancaster, if he delayed he could not make up the lost time. Even taking off straight away he had only a little hope of success. He was 10 hours behind the record time. He did not want to fail Chubbie and his parents and face the world as a failure. Unable to stop Lancaster, an official at Regain promised to search if he did not reach Goa in 24 hours. If we don't hear anything by 6 p.m. tomorrow, I will send a search car down the track to Goa. If you can burn something to light a beacon, we should see you. Lancaster took off at 6:30 p.m. on the 12th of April, 1933, towards the failing light. He had no cockpit lights, no landing lights, no survival rations or signal flares, and only 9 liters of water. Ahead lay 1,300 kilometers of uninhabited desert and the land of thirst. Witnesses reported that the takeoff was a snaking ground run, followed by a mad lurching grab for height. The dazed pilot was seen to head in the wrong direction for several minutes before finally turning and disappearing south into the twilight. Lancaster was to follow the motor track south, but in the darkness the narrow ribbon was lost from sight. He was not unduly concerned because if he held compass heading, he would stay within a few kilometers of its safety all the way to Goa. At 8 p.m., he began the 800 kilometers traverse of open desert where the road curved up to 50 kilometers away from his intended track. 30 minutes later, the engine gave a warning cough. Lancaster flashed his torch about the cockpit, but all seemed to be in order. 5 minutes later, the engine started missing badly, and the aircraft rapidly lost height. He was only 30 meters above the desert, but in the darkness, could not see the ground. The aircraft hit the desert floor, bounced for 50 meters, hit again, and tipped over on its back. Lancaster was rocketed forward into the windshield. After several hours he came to, suspended upside down, covered in congealed blood from severe lacerations to his face. He extricated himself from the petrol-soaked cockpit. The aircraft was a total wreck. At daybreak, he found the water drum undamaged and still had the chocolate and chicken sandwiches from his mother. With careful rationing, he reckoned to survive for 7 days. Lancaster started to keep a detailed diary. Aware that many airmen had lost their lives attempting to walk to safety, he promised Chubbie to stay with the aircraft as it afforded shade and would be more easily seen by search aircraft. On the 7th day, Lancaster was out of water and weak and emaciated from lack of food and water, the extreme day heat, and extreme night cold. He wrote long messages to Chubbie and his family. That night he lay down to die, but next morning was still alive, and wrote his last fateful messages. He died soon after in the heat of day, the 20th of April, 1933. Despite more searching, he was not found. An aerial search concentrated at the southern end of Lancaster's route, thinking that he would not have struck trouble so soon after leaving Regain. So initially only a car searched the northern end of the track, and Lancaster was too far from the road to be seen. Over the next 6 nights, Lancaster lit flares made from petrol-soaked fabric off the aircraft. In the black desert night, they were visible for miles. But no one came. The car from Regain crossed the wilderness to Goa without ever sighting the downed airman. "29 years later, in February 1962, as the Algerian War was flaring up, French army motorized patrols from Regain were reluctantly ranging further than ever into the inhospitable desert. One patrol accidentally came across Lancaster's crash site. The French army patrol found the twisted, upturned wreck of a tiny, single-engine biplane. Beneath the framework of a wing, once offering shade, was the mummified corpse of a man. Wrapped in fabric and wired to a wing strut was a pilot's logbook and diary. The recovery of Lancaster's diary told not only the story of the last flight, but the full story of the man himself and how he gallantly faced death. Little of his life was not touched on. After 29 years, former Australian Flying Corps and Royal Air Force pilot Captain Bill Lancaster and his aircraft, Kingsford Smith's Southern Cross Miner, had been found. His mysterious disappearance was finally solved. Thanks for watching. Hope you liked. Now finish up by enjoying this real-life footage of the HUFZ, possibly the last airworthy Avro avian in the world, found under a house in Australia in the mid-1990s and then fully restored. In 1998, it replicated Bert Hinkler's 1928 first solo flight from the UK to Australia.